Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for August 18th, 2016. Let's start in the Eastern Pacific, where we do have Invest Area 97E. Remember, the Invest numbers are 90 through 99, assigned to systems that are warranting further investigation, suspect areas of weather, whatever you want to call it. And the E, in this case, is for Eastern Pacific. And here it is here off the coast of the Baja and mainland Mexico at a pretty safe distance. Looks like this will go on to develop, but probably only reaching tropical storm strength. Water temperatures up here not quite as warm as they were last year, in 2014 especially, and the upper level environment not quite as conducive. If it made it to hurricane intensity, it would only be briefly, more than likely, and maybe a heavy rainmaker for parts of the Baja, if that. Looking at the track forecast from the various models, a little bit of disagreement here and some weirdness with what we call divergence in the tracks here, but overall this should move off to the northwest with time. Again, maybe bringing some heavy rains to portions of the southern Baja, but I think that's about it. In the Atlantic, we have Tropical Storm Fiona out here, and as of the 11 o'clock Eastern Time advisory, winds were 45 miles per hour. It is still dealing with fairly dry air throughout this region in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. The forecaster on duty mentioning that the relative humidity value is around 40%. I think plenty of us down here in the deep south would take 40% humidity any day, but that's not good for tropical cyclone formation. They like to have a very moist environment, and that's just not present right now. And you can even see a little bit of a hint of that in the background cloud cover here, showing the dry air, some Saharan air layer still out there. However, the forecaster, Stacy Stewart, one of the, I won't say better ones because they are all fantastic, but it's the way he writes. I really like the writings of his discussions. Probably some of the favorites, one of the favorites of all of them. But he talked about the warmer sea surface temperatures ahead of this system and the colder upper level environment, what we call the vertical instability, that begins to increase out ahead of this system. And so it may have a chance to intensify some. This is Bermuda right here. It looks like this is going to just kind of track up and maybe meander out well off the east coast and hopefully far enough away from Bermuda to not cause any problems. It certainly is very well constructed, if you want to say that. In other words, the low-level vorticity at the 5,000 foot level looks pretty intact. So it's a vigorous little system. It's just lacking the energy that it needs in the atmosphere. Certainly fairly warm water underneath, but again, that dry air definitely tends to affect these systems. And the upper-level winds are not quite as favorable. It's almost ready to run into this band of red. And you remember on this nice little map that the University of Wisconsin has been providing, just now adding these color codes as of late, red means stop. So the intensity may be halted, and this could end up just as a remnant low. That wouldn't be shocking either. And we still have this sort of overall cyclonic circulation out here, this tropical upper tropospheric trough, or TUTT, T-U-T-T, basically just this unfavorable cyclonic flow throughout the Atlantic basin right now. This looks like it'll kind of stretch out and break off into individual upper level lows, which themselves can sometimes act to ventilate systems if they're positioned correctly. And I think the pattern will start to change towards the end of the month, and we'll see a lot more green on this. But for now, this is where Fiona is located, and it's got to get through quite a bit of shear. In fact, they referred to it as belligerent shear last night on the discussion. I thought that was funny. The shear increasing to belligerent levels. I guess the shear is drunk and it needs to go home. This is another look at the Saharan air, and yeah, it's still pretty dry out here in the tropics. Overall, this is a pretty big influence. We've talked about this a lot. And here's Fiona, chewing away at it a little bit. So it's really a battle between the dry air and the tropical cyclone sitting over this fairly warm water. Now, this piece of energy, fairly large in size, definitely needs to be watched. A lot of the computer models jumping on this and developing it as it moves westward. Looks like it'll develop slowly, probably start to come to life, maybe after 40 degrees or 50 degrees west longitude. And then we really have to start watching here in the eastern Caribbean for potential impacts from this system, because all the while it looks like the atmosphere is going to start becoming more favorable. Now, before I get into that, I want to show you, and this leads into that, this is today's brand new updated analysis of the sea surface temperature anomalies. And again, to point out the very warm water here from Africa all the way over through the Caribbean and then off the east coast of the U.S. and the northeast Atlantic, very, very warm compared to normal, several degrees Celsius. And that would translate to several more degrees Fahrenheit above normal. It just depends on what the number is, And again, you think about, okay, I'm running a bath and I increase the water temperature by 3 degrees Fahrenheit. You really don't notice it that much. But in the ocean, that represents a tremendous amount of additional heat energy that's available to be released by these tropical cyclones. And all while this is happening, the cold area in the Pacific continues to expand, and the very cold anomalies here showing up, some of these are a couple of degrees, almost in some cases 2 degrees Celsius. I mean, look at that very dark blue right there. That's 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius below the climatological norm. So the stage is set. I've talked about this, and I believe we're starting to see it come to fruition. The upper ocean heat content, very high. Certainly in the Caribbean, it's almost off the scale there. Gulf of Mexico primed, East Coast primed. And again, where Fiona is located now, heading into areas where the water temperatures will increase a little bit more, as does the upper ocean heat content, but it should stay well away from Bermuda and the rest of the East Coast. However, this other system that's sitting out here now will be heading into increasingly favorable dynamics overall, and we really need to start watching that. And part of my suspicion here, the very reliable ECMWF, the Euro, and its ensemble members here, this goes out to the next month. So this is valid just a couple of days ago until the 16th of September. And what you're looking at in all this mishmash, the current MJO forecast, and then all these little yellow angel hair looking lines represent the different ensemble members, and then you kind of have sort of this envelope that it's bound by, if you will, in this shadowed area. And you can see that it's starting to suggest a little bleed over here into phases 8 and 1. And where does that favor? Western Hemisphere and Africa. And where do most of us live that are interested in hurricanes? In the western part of the Western Hemisphere. So, and then even the actual explicit forecast, I guess the operational, I need to research to make sure exactly what I'm talking about. But the green line here headed towards, certainly is in the null region where there's really not much MJO activity, but this indicates with some of these ensemble members here that maybe a change to a more favorable upper environment at the 200 millibar level is coming into play. So if we have all of this activity now, imagine what would happen if the Madden-Julian oscillation became favorable. And to that end, I want to show you just a couple of things on the GFS here from the morning run, the 12Z run today. This is 24 hours out. This is valid Friday, the 19th of August. There's Fiona. This is the weakness in the ridge sitting out here. It's not very thick. And so, this is easy just to kind of float away. It doesn't have deep mid-level ridging sitting out here to block it and just continue its way on to the west. This represents the energy associated with that other tropical wave, sort of this large pouch of energy that will be moving west with time, and it probably is going to start to come to life somewhere just east of the islands. In fact, if we jump out to 5 days, 120 hours, this is next Tuesday morning, then here's Fiona right here, leaving between the ridges here, the nice trough coming off the east coast, and so it makes its way on out through that weakness. But these other systems are far enough south of this ridge that they're going to continue west. Maybe something trying to develop here, but here's the other system that does go on to develop in the models. I generally stay away from showing the model output beyond 5 days. I might show something at day 7, but that's pretty much the extent of it. But just beware in the eastern islands here in the Caribbean, and then eventually possibly the southwest Atlantic, that something might be trying to come into your area. More advanced notice of that from the Euro. This is the highly regarded ensemble probability system, or EPS, the ensemble prediction system. I knew I could get it right. And this shows all the different possible tracks from the ensemble members, and you get the idea that it's sniffing something out. Okay, it's developing something coming off the African coast. Some of this is Fiona, and you just got to pay attention here. This latter part of August, it's no surprise. And in fact, if you kind of look at it from a different perspective, the tropical cyclone strike probability, obviously, the closer to the center and the current time frame you are, the higher that probability is. But you can see that something seems to be aimed towards the Caribbean here within the next 10 days. And of course, the Euro is regarded as a very reliable global computer model. Great track record. It's not infallible, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And when you see these signs, it's not like last year where we had a raging El Nino in the Pacific, colder than normal main development region water temperatures, and just sinking air everywhere. The pattern's changing, and one to more favorability, and we need to be ready for that anywhere in the basin, not just United States interests, that's for sure. All right, well, that's all I have for today. We'll keep an eye on things, and certainly what's going on in the Eastern Pacific as well. We'll watch Invest Area 97E. We'll see if that manages to do anything interesting. Have a great rest of your Thursday afternoon. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. As always, thanks for your time and attention. I'll be back with you again tomorrow.